Hello, yes, loud and clear. How you doing? Excellent.
Did you hear my introduction, everybody, or did I go muted?
I just heard you now. Hi, this is
I
Jagdeep
see.
Dhamra.
Right.
I'm based in the UK. In terms of my background, 25 plus years across various industries, sectors, verticals, and geographies. What do I do? Mainly work with C and board level members of organizations of various sizes, and the idea is to get them to a good place. So this could be anything from improving return on investment, reducing total cost of operations, innovation, go-to-market strategies, technology overhaul, etc. I'll pop my LinkedIn profile in the chat, so if anybody wants to connect, feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jagdeep. You jumped the gun a little bit there, but Eugenio, would you mind turning the camera off, please, buddy? And if we can then go for a introduction to Angelina, and then Eugenio, and then James. Eugenio, I've made you a presenter, but I don't know if you can hear us and if you can be audible.
Hey, my name is Angelina. I've been in product for the past 11 plus years. I have worked with I help startups and corporations launch their products, and happy to help with any questions today. I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Eugenio, I think the reason why you can't talk is because you haven't accepted the call via the email that I sent you. So would you mind actually downloading the app, the Microsoft Teams app, on your phone or desktop? I think that would be best. Otherwise, we'll just keep going in a loop and we won't be able to hear you. James, can you hear us?
I can, yes. So hi everyone.
Go for it, buddy.
Yeah, I'm James Cummins. I've worked for about 12 years now as a fractional CTO. So working with a number of different organizations, but mainly grassroots startups. And for me, I believe the most exciting and the most challenging period for any business, getting a product off the ground, securing your first customer, securing your first investment. So yeah, that's short and sweet, but that's me. I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat. Please feel free to connect.
Very good. Now, here's a quick question. Did everybody hear me when I made my introduction? Because I think I got cut off. I think I might have muted myself by mistake, me and my fat thumbs.
I heard you.
You heard it. That's good. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Right here. Now, once we wait for Eugenio to join us, how about some do's and don'ts? What is important to you when it comes to early stage startups building their product or tech? What do you see often go wrong, and what do you see done well? Maybe one each if we can, please. So perhaps if we can start with Jagdeep, then Angelina, and then James again, please.
Yeah, sure. One don't is what I'd call don't outsource the core. So this is essentially the heart of the business. So in some cases, it could be a CRM, it could be where your data sits, it could be the core code base. So the idea is to always retain control, accountability, and decision making. So all that insight that you have on the domain, avoid outsourcing that, because I have seen from kind of experience a lot of organizations essentially devolving all control, and everything is outsourced, including all the business intelligence, etc. So it's fine to outsource, but just be careful about what exactly you're outsourcing, because it can become a challenge on many levels when you try and claw back that accountability, control, and the actual kind of heart of the business.
Cool. I've got a do focus on value, focus on solving problems for users, and if you've already got an MVP out there or a product out there, focus on fixing or improving on their frustrations. Mainly because the focus on value is, I'd say, the most valuable thing that you can do for your business. As the more problems you solve, the more engagement you'll get in your product, and the more motivated your users will be to buy into your product.
Yeah, I think those are both absolutely great points. And actually, the point I was going to make is directly related to your point there, Angelina, but the opposite, the don't. which is absolutely stay focused on the value, but don't get wedded to how you're implementing it. So, you'll discover pretty quickly what works and what doesn't. But often people get so wedded to their idea of how it should be implemented that they become blind to external inputs and what the market's telling them. So be very flexible when you're first building your MVP, particularly. But to be honest, throughout the startup journey, the same thing applies. So don't get wedded to your implementation.
Hey. Well, thank you very much, all three of you, for that. Hopefully, Eugenia will join us soon. We'll go on to the next question, but just a quick reminder: we're here with three brilliant panelists on product and tech. They've been there and done it themselves, and they're here to help us for the next 48 minutes now, with whatever questions you may have in terms of building that early stage product or tech of yours. The idea is quite simple. Any questions you may have, whether that's on product roadmap or design or testing, prototype, launching your MVP, automation, low to no code, landing pages, building apps, and all that jazz, this is the place to get your answers. For those of you on the live streams, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, please be aware that unfortunately we are unable to monitor your questions there live. So you would have to join us here on Microsoft Teams. The quickest way, I guess, is to go onto our website, startuptoscaleup.com. You find today's session, which is Startup Product and Tech Q&A 157. You click join. It's a quick registration, and that gets you a link to your email. And through that link, you can join us here on Microsoft Teams. It's audio only, which means once you get in, you don't need to keep your camera on. And by the way, once you're here, then simply drop your question in the chat. We'll give you the mic, and we'll take it from there. If, by the way, your questions are on other matters and not product and tech, then please save them for the other conversations we have. On Mondays is talent, Tuesdays product and tech, Wednesdays growth, Thursdays fundraising, second Friday of each month it's UK startup law, and third Friday of each month it's UK startup finances. So again, we've got now about 47 minutes. Let's go to Eugenio with a quick introduction, and then perhaps one do and one don't that is important to you when it comes to early stage building, Eugenio. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I'm Eugenio Galeotto, fractional CTO and fractional Chief AI Officer, Senior Product Engineer, and serial founder in web, mobile, generative, and agentic AI. And in the last 12 years, I built different kinds of products across different industries for startups and enterprises. I founded my own VC scale startups in the Bay Area. I've been part of Entrepreneur First, and I continue to build my own stuff as long as supporting other companies in doing that. So building something early is about de-risking, in my opinion. So it's about basically understanding why and try to simplify and try to deeply visualize something before you do that. But at the same time, it's very important to start it, because otherwise you don't see the goal and you don't build momentum, which is crucial to help yourself in putting energy in what you're doing. So de-risking, visualizing, and at the same time building stuff, so default to action to make something working in order to create momentum for yourself and the people around you.
Thank you very much to all four of you. Now we'll go on to our first question. This was sent to us from Bristol. We built a language learning app in Bristol designed for use across phones, tablets, and desktops. The user experience varies significantly between these formats, and I'd like to standardize it without sacrificing usability. What product decisions should I consider to achieve a consistent look and feel? How can we structure our testing process to identify compatibility issues early? You'd think this is quite standardized across various builders, wouldn't you? Okay. Um, well, let's start perhaps with Eugenio, then we'll go on to Angelina, then Jagdeep, and then James, please. Just try and keep it about a minute each. If you've got uh, anything to add here, and if not, don't worry, we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, so there's a couple of points to consider. The first one is whether web versus mobile is just about the same web platform, but viewed by the mobile browser. This means that all the features need to be there. If we say instead web and mobile as like a web platform and mobile app, the first question I would ask is, do I need all of the features in the web on the mobile app and vice versa? That said, I will say that I think that in general, like it's about the friction. Of course, on the web, you can put a lot more stuff. The navigation is different. The things you visualize are different. In mobile, the first thing to consider is navigation, because you need to navigate with tabs, or you need to navigate with multiple models here and there. So in general, like a very good design makes a lot of difference. So I will start collecting feedbacks from a great UX UI designer, and from there, the best way to unify it is to try to use similar technologies to the web and mobile. I always advise, for example, React and React Native, or React Native and React Native Web, to do a cohesive experience so that you can share as many components and UIs as possible between the two platforms.
Cool. So from my perspective, I think if you're offering app on mobile and desktop, then it's always good to take a mobile first design approach. So designing for mobile and then kind of adjusting your designs to show on desktop. I've had real good success by pairing UX designers with developers to come up with in a collaborative way, so that they can come up with a design system that works across all devices, and utilizing a components approach, having style guides done is very useful, because then you can have different components and styles that the developer can implement straight away, rather than having everything designed for them. From a testing perspective, there's loads of testing products out there. One to name is Browser Stack, and that will allow you to test across real devices. In terms of process, my big rule is never ever release without testing. And always try to get some user testing. So you'll have your technical QA testers, or your developers who are testing in their code, and then you would have some user testing. So if you have a product person in your business, or whoever's running backlog, should test and then hand it over to those users, to like internal users, like stakeholders, and try and get people to test across different devices, so desktop, mobile, web, mobile app, etc., before releasing to live.
Yeah, just adding to what's been said, I think without understanding the complexity of your app, it's very difficult to kind of recommend a technology. Typically, React, etc., works, but the key thing here is what you want is a consistent experience, which means that you need to essentially make sure your interaction models are consistent. So, for example, if a particular piece of functionality does something on the app, it should do something similar on the mobile or on the website. So the usability aspect is important, rather than the look and feel, which is kind of far easier. Cosmetic changes are far easier to do, but it's the usability that I think you're focused on. What I'd also suggest is develop what I'd call component parity. So in other words, a particular component has the same logic both on the mobile and the desktop. and all is designed for touch and click simultaneously. So if you're clicking on the mobile side, you're touching on the if you're clicking on the web, you're touching on the mobile, and always make sure that you've got a token a design system in place, which means that you've got consistency in terms of color, spacing, type, etc. There are nuances between Android and Apple, which you have to be conscious of. And like I said earlier, depending on the complexity, I don't know if you're using native builds or native apps. So it's very difficult to recommend. Just shifting on to the testing side, it's always good to have like a contract system. And what I mean by that is that you've got visual regression tests. So every time you're doing carrying out a particular journey within that, there are particular breakpoints that you're doing and performing, depending on what the individual is carrying out, both on the mobile and the app. So that consistency, that's what you're looking for. That's one thing to look at. And also, in some cases, you might want device-specific journeys. So like I said, Android, Apple, and other ecosystems do vary, but you want to try and keep the journeys as consistent as possible, bearing in mind the platform that you're dealing with. The point made earlier around doing real-world testing, that's very important. But also try and make sure that your acceptance criteria is around the UX, UI, and the backend as well, because depending on how you design your app and your mobile, you will get different levels of hit on the back end. Again, these are because of the nuances. So it's not as clear as just kind of creating it on React and assuming everything's going to run consistently across all the platforms.
Yeah, some great points there. I mean, I think most areas have been covered. I guess the bit I would add is, again, going back to the point that I was making earlier about not getting too wedded to what you build initially. And this is really going to depend on what point you're at in the journey, right? If you're just building out your first prototype, or you're building an MVP that you're going to try to take to market, or perhaps you're even a stage further than that. I mean, if you're right at the beginning stage and you're building out your first prototype, obviously there's prototyping tools out there that you can use to test and get some user feedback at a very early stage. I've seen startups make the mistake of designing out a whole app before they've even got any user feedback. I don't think that's a great way to go if you're prototyping. You want to get feedback as early as possible. Obviously, if you're a little bit further, then you've got some user feedback on an initial prototype. I'd still say there are design systems that you can use out the box, like Google's material design, for example, that save you reinventing the wheel. That can save a lot of time and effort. And then when it comes to testing, I mean, there's some great frameworks out there like Maze, for example, and others that enable you to get those user insights without having to, source loads of different users and so on, and collate the feedback in a way that's easy to digest and apply. So I think in essence, it's use stuff that's available out of the box and keep it simple as long as possible.
Are things like Maze free, and how do they work in terms of the users? Does one have to go out there, let's say social media or whatever pool they have, to get people to sign up onto Maze, or you put this on Maze and then the people that are already registered there get some kind of news feed or some newsletter or an email or something? How does it work? James?
Yeah, I think you could. Well, certainly, I think you can do a bit of both. Obviously, getting feedback from people that you trust, who represent the ideal segment that you're targeting, is always the best. There are different sources that you can tap into if you want just some generic user research. But I think part of the challenge is more about actually collating the feedback, because if you go out in an unstructured way and just ask people what did you think of my app, it obviously can be a bit hit and miss how valuable the feedback's going to be. So actually being able to draw insights into their interactions with your app and so on could be far more valuable in terms of actually quantifying those different touch points and issues that people had in the app. So yeah, using a tool can be a far more reliable way of gaining those kind of insights.
Yeah, because see what I see, and I see this quite often. And if anyone else wants to chime in, please do. I see this happening all the time. Unless you are somebody who's got like a serious, massive following or community around you, even then they struggle, mind you. But unless you're at that stage, most people really make an absolute shit of a job when it comes to those early users that they can get stuff from them in terms of, I don't know, feedback on how the product works or actually the idea itself, and so on. And you've got things like product hunt and what have you. But again, it's hard unless you can direct people to go there. Most of these, I haven't used Maze, but I have had people use it. But my understanding is that most of these platforms, unless you can direct people there, it's almost useless because there's a billion other products on those platforms. So by the time people get to yours, it just doesn't happen. Basically, is there other ways that people can do this? Is there some other tool or website or means where it's easier for founders to get people to test their idea? Or sorry, not their idea, what they've built.
Just chiming in, some people, startups will use Reddit, for example. They might use social media like Facebook. Some might do testing through ads, so they might put
Sorry
out.
to interrupt, Angelina, because I know there's nothing worse when somebody just cuts you off. But
It's
in
okay.
terms of Reddit, what's because I don't find that much used in the UK, or am I just kind of still stuck in the 90s kind of thing? Because from what I can see in Reddit, it's a lot of US obviously, but other markets, but not so much in the UK. Do you find that to be true, or?
Yeah, but I've seen some UK companies post as well. It just depends on the tools that you have. So like a lot of the time you would post a link to somewhere. So giving the example of Maze, if you already have a following of users, you can create like a panel of customers. So that's where you communicate with customers. You send them an email and you ask them to join the panel. And some companies have to do it on a paid basis, so you pay people to test, but many will be able to do it on a free basis purely because people are interested in your idea and willing to give up their time to test. And then you'll just link it to the website that you're using. So it could be a Google form. You might use Discord. It just depends. You would then collect the feedback through different means like video, Excel spreadsheets. There's so many different ways to collect feedback. But just to answer your other question about how Maze works, you can, I think, integrate it with, I think it's integrated with Figma. And so you showed the designs alongside questions, and it can be really powerful, but I think it's best for bigger communities. So what I did at Horse and Country, for example, is we sent out designs and asked people to kind of click on different things and ask them questions, and then you got some real good insights from that.
So there is no magic wands and there's no magic platform.
No.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Let's move on to the next question. We've only got 30 minutes to go. So for those of you on the live streams, please don't waste your time sending me messages or comments. I do appreciate you following us and tuning in, but unfortunately we are unable to monitor your questions live. So if you do have any questions for us, please join us here on Microsoft Teams. Quickest way to do that is go to our website, startuptoscaleup.club. You find today's session, which is Startup Product and Tech Q&A 157. You click join. It's a quick registration. That gets you a link to our, to your email. And through that link, you can join us here. It's audio only, by the way. And once you're here, all you have to do is drop your question in the chat. We'll then give you the mic and you fire away with your question. We're helping founders today with building your early stage product and tech. And we're taking questions on anything from product roadmap to design, prototype, testing, automation, landing pages, apps, stuff a bit more technical perhaps, or launching your MVP and anything in between or beyond for that matter. If, however, your questions today are not on product and tech, please save them for the other conversations we run. Mondays, talent, Tuesdays, product and tech, Wednesdays, growth, Thursdays, fundraising, second Friday of each month, it's UK startup law, and third Friday of each month, it's UK startup finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time, and you can RSVP to any of them via our site, startup2scaleup.club. And actually, when you're there, you might also want to join our community on WhatsApp. We've got groups of investors, founders, and operators. And at the top and bottom of our site, there's a WhatsApp icon you can tune in to. Sorry, you can click onto in order to join us. Now we'll go on to question 2. My startup in Edinburgh provides live sports analytics, and any downtime causes us to lose credibility with users who need real-time updates. How can we build a fault-tolerant system that maintains high availability, particularly during peak event times? Should we implement load balancing, and if so, what configuration would ensure our system stays live under heavy loads? Well, to start with, you can come and ask this question live. But apart from that, maybe we can go on to James, then Jagdeep, then Eugenio, and last but not least, Angelina. Although I know your expertise is mainly product, but it's up to you if you would like to chime in as well, Angelina. I think we said James, Jagdeep, Eugenio, and Angelina.
Okay, yeah. So I think there's 2 levels to this. One's at the application layer and one's at the infrastructure layer. It depends who you ask, but there would be some who would point you in the direction of microservices in terms of application design. If you're early stage products, I would 100% steer you away from that. If there are specific elements of the service, like, for example, you've got something that's polling to get score updates, for example, perhaps that's something that you've identified as causing a significant spike. And that's something that could be split out into its own microservice. But generally following a microservices architecture for an early stage startup, I would suggest is a pretty bad idea. I'd like to use the term macro services. So actually splitting things out into services, but on a much bigger scale than a microservice. So that's kind of application layer. Infrastructure layer, simple stuff like load balancing and auto scaling is something you can do pretty easily on AWS or other cloud platforms. So you can look at that. Obviously, if your application isn't designed properly, costs can become quite substantial if you're just horizontally scaling in that way. But yeah, certainly those would be the 2 things to look at.
So
Yeah,
on top of the,
sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just add, well, having designed the Olympics website once upon a time as chief architect, it depends on your budget as well to be, and also the complexity of what you're doing, I would say. So not sure where you've actually hosted the platform or how you've engineered it, but again, just general principles, I would say try and do architect for redundancy. So aspects such as multi-zone, multi-region, active. Again, it depends on your architecture in terms of how you've evolved it, but these are kind of some of the non-functional aspects that you need to look at. I think the global load balancing piece has been mentioned already, but also look at content delivery networks that sit above that, which can actually distribute your code and your content far better. You can also kind of look at layer 7, layer 4 load balancing, which would help. Again, a lot of this you can get out of the box now from most cloud providers. Look at event-driven architecture, that helps. Auto-scaling groups as well, that helps quite a bit as well. Again, these can be architected very easily. I might go against James here just in terms of the mention about microservice, but modular architecture is very important if you're looking to introduce fault tolerance and graceful degradation of services. Again, if you're designing any sports analytics app and downtime is costing money or credibility, then you might want to offset your reputational risk by introducing better architecture. Circuit breakers are very important in the architecture, so look at kind of bulkhead and retry logic. These are kind of design patterns that are available, and you can kind of look them up as well. And the fallbacks as well. So if something fails, what do you do next? So those would be some of the key ones without understanding a bit more detail about how you've architected your solution.
So I'm assuming that your traffic is not that big at the moment, because otherwise it would already have something in place. But hopefully it's increasing, and there's various considerations to do. So the first one is yeah, apart from the optimizations like the CDN and any layer of caching and any stuff like that, there's so where is the problem when it comes to real-time stuff? Is that the CPU usage? Is that something else? So where's the bottleneck? The second thing is about the framework you decided to use. For example, Node.js is faster for I/O operations than Python, for example. So that's another thing. Some operations can be delegated to, for example, lambdas. So maybe you can use your main Node.js platform to do real-time stuff, and then you can delegate through through Lambda, for example, the CPU heavy operations or any operation that may take resources from your main server. Another thing could be to use a job queue. So it's similar to the Lambda concept, but essentially you may have another like machine doing some tasks. Scaling vertically can be the simplest approach at the moment. So you just spend more, which is not great, but at least if the bottlenecks are in the CPU usage, the RAM usage and stuff like that, you can solve it. If you have a problem in the database design, that's a bit trickier because you may do longer queries. Your DB operations are not efficient, and this can be a problem that requires a deeper refactoring. And that said, you can easily then have a load balancer, and maybe initially you can have, let's say, 2 machines, and maybe more in the future or more in the peaks. So there are different approaches, but the common ground is don't use microservices or Kubernetes, because it's definitely over engineering. There's monolithic platforms that work very well without that at scale, and try to use some Terraform or Pulumi if you want to do DevOps, because it makes it easier to find experts in architectures and cloud providers, and you can define an architecture that is structured with a file, so you can easily transfer it to another person or another developer if you need to. And just keep track of the metrics and identify any bottleneck.
Thank you, Eugenio. Angelina, did you want to add anything, or shall we move on to the next one?
No, nothing to add from me. I'll leave it to the experts.
Brilliant stuff. I mean, you're not bad on the tech side yourself. You've got an app out there and a website that is live and all that jazz. Right, let's go on to the next one. We've got 21 minutes to go, so I think we have time for a couple more questions. This one, okay. By the way, I am popping and pasting the questions in the chat if the panelists want to read them, but I'll read them out loud for the live streams. So Angelina has time for only one more question, so I'll be quick and give Angelina a go first on that, if you like. We're about to fully launch our fintech startup product based on MVP input/feedback. Okay, so they've released the MVP in Cardiff. We have multiple small teams working on different components, causing coordination issues in deployments. How can we use DevOps to unify our development cycles and improve release coordination? Are there tools that help visualize deployment timelines across teams to minimize conflicts and streamline feature rollouts? Let's start with Angelina, then James, then Jagdeep, then Eugenio, please.
So I haven't myself worked with in collaboration with other developers, but I've seen dev teams. I've seen this a lot of times with dev teams. And I know that some have used GitHub in the past. I'm not sure if that helps identify issues between code bases and conflicts. I do know that some have actually used Slack as well. They've done some integrations with that. There are tools out there that can show you conflicts between different files when you're uploading them to the server. Although I can't recommend any, I'm sure there are other people on this call that can recommend. But yeah, just having a close-knit team, doing your daily stand-ups, making sure that everyone knows what's happening between each other, and trying to be as close to each other as a team as possible is the most productive way I see with teams, and I've managed teams in the past. That's the best way to move forward so that you don't conflict with each other. I've also seen a process called peer programming, where you kind of buddy up with someone else to program or code some components or features, so that you can learn from each other as to what each other are doing, and yeah, implement your own processes. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much, Angelina, and thank you for joining us today. I know you need to leave early, so see you next time, I guess.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I think we then said, God, I've lost it now. I think we said James, then Jagdeep, then Eugenio. I hope I've got that right.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'd say with this one, similar to the last question, actually, that there's the application layer and infrastructure layer, both of which could be causing problems. So I don't think the question specifies where these challenges sit. I mean, there are some.
It doesn't, but if it helps, I sort of, so I met this person at Tech Week, actually, London Tech Week, and he was trying to explain how he's got, just for argument's sake, a person in Bangalore doing something, 2 people in Romania doing something else, 3 people in the UK. He was saying how he hires people on these platforms to do bits and bobs. And I think, if I remember correctly, he said there were only 4 people full time, and they're either half or more than half, either 2 or 3 days in the UK, and there was another one somewhere else. But it struck me the way he was explaining it, and he said it was a cost-saving exercise. But it struck me that he was going to tons and tons of people to do bits and bobs. I just remember thinking, how the hell are you able to manage all that together? But he said, oh, no, there's loads of apps out there. So now he said this question. Anyway, carry on, sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dilemma, and one I think most startup founders would rather avoid. Again, it depends how early stage you are. You obviously mentioned that there's a production release following an MVP, so I guess it's a fairly mature proposition. But it's the kind of situation that ideally you avoid for as long as possible. But if you do find yourself there for whatever reason, obviously we don't know technically the reasons why this may have happened, but especially if you've got a small team, you would hope that you could keep them fairly tight knit and working closely together before you hit. There's when you start scaling out a dev team, obviously there's very different challenges that you face. But as a startup, one of the advantages you've got is you typically don't have those kind of inefficiencies that you get when you have bigger teams. So the longer you can keep that, the more kind of agile you can be, and that's a major advantage as a startup. But if you do find yourself there, there are well-established tools to help with these things. Like depending if you're on like GitHub, for example, they have GitHub Actions you could use, or other platforms have similar things where you can automate your CI pipelines. Those tools can be great. So you have automated processes that run whenever you do a release, and that will include all your testing and so on. So you'll be able to flag any issues early. On the infrastructure layer, there are other tools like CloudFormation and AWS. So I'm not AWS specific here. We do a lot of stuff in AWS, but there are others like Terraform, for example, that help manage changes on your infrastructure. And just the third thing, I'd say probably worth looking at containerization as well, things like Docker, and that ensures you don't have differences in terms of the environments between different developers in different places. So you ensure consistency across those different environments.
Thank you. And before we go to Eugenia and Jagdeep, is there one tool out there that they can use for all of this stuff to have an pretty much automatic overview of what's going on? And is there one that is free, maybe? Fellas, Eugenia, Jagdeep?
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
sorry,
not
go on,
aware.
James. You can
Yeah,
have a go as well.
I was going to say I'm not aware of a single tool, but platforms like GitHub, for example, do have free plans that you can do certain amounts of stuff in, but there's obviously limitations.
Indeed. I think we said Eugenia and then Jagdeep, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, apart from the fact that probably many small teams may not be the most efficient way to add new features, the key point is that deployment is easy. So you just press a button and you deploy. The real problem is how do you deal with the moment in which something doesn't work? And so this requires probably one single level of reasoning, let's say. So one center point that handles all of this stuff. So probably the best way is to have one person who is in charge of the releases, who can take anything in the code base, make sure everything is aligned from the testing perspective, stability perspective, staging perspective, all of these measures, and does the release, so that this person can design processes to handle the specific case and minimize any problem, and avoid to leave users with bad service for hours potentially.
Thank you, Eugenia. Yes, Jagdeep, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think given it's a fintech, I'm not sure if it's regulated or not, or under some or regulations or any compliance aspects. Having worked in the fintech space for the last 7 odd years,
I think he said, if I remember correctly, I think he told me at Tech Week that he was regulated. They've got an FCA approval. I can't remember the exact term he used, but it was something along the lines of getting something from the FCA, and he said he got it.
Yeah, so I think in that case, quality assurance is very, very important, and making sure the quality of the code is very consistent. If he's got remote developers working at different levels and different cadences, this is obviously going to introduce further challenges, especially when it comes to approvals and audits, etc. So I think some generic advice would be look at trunk-based development. What I mean by that is your branches stay short-lived and they integrate into main frequently. So just I'm assuming the guy knows how to do code branching, etc. When you're doing releases, the cadence has to be explicit. So what I mean by that is you've got consistent, predictable, fixed date deployment. So for example, you're going to deploy every Friday or every Tuesday, etc. So the idea is that all the teams are lined up and the changes have to be within the next train. If you miss it, you have to wait for the next train. So that introduces a bit of regular cadence into the project. Look at switching infrastructure as a product. So as mentioned earlier, you can use Terraform and Pulumi. What this does is essentially creates a version dependency that your platform is aligned to the code, which is very important. And also look at standardizing your pipelines. So this is your CDCI templates, GitHub Actions, GitLab CI, Circle CI, whatever they're using. So each team inherits the same build, the test, and the deployment workflow, so it's consistent. And also in the case of regulated sectors, you would want to add gates for security compliance checks as well, and any rollback support that you're doing. It may be worth looking at creating a platform team or a sub-team which actually looks at maintaining all the development environments, deployment pipelines, observability tooling, etc. So those would be some generic ones I can mention just in terms of introducing consistency and quality into the pipeline without knowing any more details. There are a ton of tools out there. Some I think have already been mentioned, but if you're working in a regulated sector, it may be worth investing in something like Jira, which will help, and also looking at something like Sleuth or Harness, which gives you deployment tracking. It also gives you metrics, especially when you're working with the teams across multiple geographies, and each team's working at a slightly different cadence. So those would be some kind of bits and pieces of advice. If you want to know more, obviously, yeah, you can drop me a message on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Jagdeep. And just before we move on to the next one, so I hear a lot of product people, maybe not so much tech people, but product people talking about Jira. Can you give us a quick rundown on what's possible, especially for people like this one, with Jira? And if the other lads want to interfere to chime in after as well, you're welcome to.
Yeah, sure. Since my career itself, Jira has grown from something that was very lightweight and quick to becoming a big beast. So I think it's with Jira, it's pretty much a sledgehammer. But what it does allow you to do is manage a lot of pipelines, workflows, stories, epics, your product backlog. It does a ton of things. It depends what you want to use it for. There's so much functionality in there in terms of managing your workflow and even code, etc. And it's got literally hundreds of integrations into different other tools. It provides you a centralized dashboard. It can manage kind of everything from velocity. So it's very versatile for developers, even for architects. You can use it for product managers, program managers, etc. So again, it's very difficult to kind of give one particular use case for Jira because it does so much
I
now.
hear you.
And it's actually
And
become
what's the cost like with Jira compared to others?
It's not cheap. I would say it's probably closer to mid to top. It's not the most expensive piece of kind of platform. It's more like an ecosystem, and it's kind of license based or volume based or user based, depending on the kind of what you want to use it for, and it's got different products within it. So depending on what you want to use Jira for, it has kind of different elements that you can switch on and switch off. But I would say, yeah, do a bit of research and kind of make sure that, and again, it may not be necessary that you need to use Jira. There's also other tools out there that you could use. It usually depends on the use case. The only reason I mentioned Jira is because typically in the kind of regulated space, you want something that is robust and where you've got a single view on the engineering kind of aspects. It's far easier for regulators, if they do want to audit the system, to find that centralized view, and you can create a ton of dashboards as well. So that's the reason it's easier. It reduces a lot of overheads later on. If it's not regulated, then I wouldn't. Yeah, I would look at something kind of quick and dirty.
Thank you very much for that. I think we should now go on. We've got 7 minutes to go, so let's go on to the next question, probably the last one for today. I'm the founder of a SaaS platform in London that provides CRM tools to small businesses. We need to implement multi-tenancy so clients can have isolated data without the cost of separate instances. Could you advise on best practices for database design in a multi-tenant architecture to ensure data isolation and security? And should we consider a hybrid model that balances shared and isolated resources? Jesus Christ. Okay, let's start with Eugenio, then Jagdeep, then James, please.
So I would say that I'm not the best person for this question because this is deeper in the DevOps stuff. So I'll leave it to the others.
Good stuff. Jagdeep?
Yeah, it's kind of asking about 7 days worth of consultancy in one question. Especially given that we don't know how this has been built. I think there's some generic principles that you could look at because I've kind of designed multi-tenancy platforms before. I would say just make sure that everything's split according to different IDs. So essentially every customer has a separate ID, and that cadence or separation goes throughout the architecture. You might want to split depending on what the CRM does and how the CRM works in terms of data sensitivity, etc. Whether you're doing it tenancy via regions, or whether you're doing it according to data sovereignty, or whether you're doing it based upon data privacy levels. There's a ton of kind of prerequisites to understand before you would actually recommend a solution. But typically, you would need encryption strategies you need throttling limits per tenant. You need to make sure that your schema is extensible, so it's not limited to particular fields or metadata, and you want to make sure you put audit logs. Those would be some high-level things. Depending on the database of choice, you might want to look at row-level security just to enforce per tenant the data visibility. But again, it's a very deep answer to actually provide kind of a robust solution for this.
I hear you. Now, you'll have to forgive me because I am quite ignorant when it comes to the tech side. But shouldn't that be an easy way to simply just add password protection to various levels? Is that easily done?
Not necessarily, because you might have role-based access or asset-based access in various access control models. But in the case of tools which are SaaS and multi-tenancy, you want to make sure that you've got separation at multiple layers, not just at kind of one layer, which is a user layer. You might want to even separate API calls from one API. So the idea is that, in layman's terms, before an API shares data with another API, that you've done a security handshake, and that security handshake is specific
I see.
to that particular user. So I don't want to initiate an API which has been triggered off by another user, and that API doesn't. So there's levels of intelligence that you want to introduce in the architecture to introduce those layers of separation. So there's no leakage from one tenant to another. Again, some platforms do allow shared components. So rather than creating exact replicas of APIs across the entire ecosystem, which is not very cost efficient, you're essentially creating instances, and they can be short-lived, or they can stick around, persistent, etc. And because of the nature of multi-tenancy platforms, you have persistence per tenant. So the idea is that you've got an immutable record of access and changes that have occurred per tenant. Especially, this is very important for things like GDPR and the transparency, because if I am using the platform, I want a certain level of guarantee that my data and my usage is not going to be leaking out or being seen by another tenant or another user. So how do you guarantee that? So that's why there's kind of layers of separation across. So it's not as simple as just creating access controls per user.
So basically, the best value I can add during this product and tech Q&A is keep it short. Thank you very much for that, Jagdeep. James, anything to add on this?
Not a lot. I guess it's probably more a product consideration than anything here, because if you're looking to avoid the cost of database isolation, then realistically you're looking at data isolation, which means effectively, indexing your data according to by each tenant, and then as Jagdeep was saying, you've then got access controls in place to ensure that access to data is restricted. But are the clients actually asking to have isolated databases? Is this something, if it's small, I think the question mentions these are small businesses. Is it a case that they just need to ensure the security of the data, or is there another reason why the clients are actually asking for true isolation of their data? If it's the latter, then perhaps there's a separate product level where they can offer that covers the additional cost. And then for those businesses who just want security of the data, of course, that could be achieved through multiple different means, encryption and the access control mechanisms. So perhaps it's worth just looking at those slightly separately, because security of data is obviously paramount to everyone, but true isolation may not be a requirement for all.
Very good point. And James, can I ask you, just before we go on to our parting words, what sort of costs are we talking about here to go to that next stage? In general, I know that there's different rates for various things, but are we talking like massive stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, the database can often be the most expensive, most expensive component of the architecture. So yeah, I mean, that's clearly an area. If that can be optimized, then it's well worth consolidating that resource. It really depends on the scale of the application. You could be spending anywhere from a few hundred to a few million on running database servers. So it's impossible to say without knowing the scale of the application.
That makes sense. Well, thank you very much for that. Right, let's go to some parting words. Jagdeep had to drop out, but maybe we can start with Eugenio and then James, because it's 1 o'clock, which means it's time to wrap this up. What are you going to leave us with, Eugenio?
Sorry, can you repeat?
No, I'm saying any parting words before we let you go.
Any part?
Any parting words? Any
Sorry.
final input from you
Oh.
before we close it?
Yeah, so start building something, whatever it is today. Anything will follow.
Good on. Thank you very much. Last but not least, James.
Yeah, and keep it simple for as long as you can. The longer you can remain agile, that's your key advantage you've got as a startup. So don't get tricked into believing you need to build out an enterprise grade solution early on. Keep it simple, maintain your agility, and then you maintain your startup advantage.
Super duper. Well, thank you very much, especially to my amazing panelists. Of course, thank you to the ones that initially joined us here on Microsoft Teams. Thank you to those of you that tuned in via the live streams, whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. I'm sure once this is over, I'll see quite a few messages there. So please, just a quick reminder, next time, join us live here on Microsoft Teams instead, because we cannot monitor your questions, whether it's comments or messages or emails or whatever you do during the live session. So the best thing for you to do next time is to join us live on whichever Q&A you prefer, and do that on Microsoft Teams. Quickest and easiest way to do that is to go to our website, where you can register to any of our regular sessions. We run 6 regular events: Monday's Talent, Tuesday's Product and Tech, Wednesday's Growth, Thursday's Fundraising, second Friday of each month is UK Startup Law, and third Friday of each month is UK Startup Finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. And again, you can go to startuptoscaleup.com, find your preferred session, click join, click registration, gets you a link to your email when you can join through that link. When you're on our site, you may also want to join our WhatsApp community. We've got groups of founders, investors, and operators. And at the top and bottom of our site, you'll find a WhatsApp icon that you can click to join us. As far as my parting words are concerned, I guess just remember the startup journey can be both interesting but also quite challenging. So try to have some fun in the meantime, and be kind to yourself and everyone else for that matter too. Otherwise, hope to see you tomorrow for Startup Growth. We've got some amazing growth specialists joining us on the panel at 12 o'clock. A great afternoon, and God bless you all. Bye-bye for now.